Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. Super nice that you were able to make the time to come listen to the first Share North Squared webinar in a list of many to come for the coming 2 years. And we're going to talk about the impact of shared mobility and on cities and why a city needs policies that rock to enable actual to enable actual change, you need some policies to make that happen. And we have two people explaining this to you. First will be Jeffrey Matthijs from Autodealer.net, who will go into the shared mobility action plans. We saw that in the word cloud earlier, the why and the how. And then we have Michael Johansson from Lund University, who will talk about the role of shared mobility in policies on spatial use and green space. So it's a link to both of them. And we will have the two presentations, and afterwards we will do the questions. So type them in Mentimeter, think of anything you can, we will go over them and then decide if you want to answer them now or maybe later, and we will move on with that. First off, Share North Squared. It's an Interreg North Sea region project hosted, led by the city of Bremen, which Cornelia is also here in the presentation. And with that project, we aim to increase sustainability, resource and spatial efficiency of real estate developments, as well as the affordability of housing by integrating shared mobility as a means of supporting multimodal travel behavior and for reducing car ownership, car dependency, and the demand for parking. As you hear, this is a lot. This is a very interesting project, mainly focused on how to really make efficient use of shared mobility within real estate developments. And to do that, you, of course, the first part to go on is working with policies. What can you do? How can you steer as a city what is happening? And to talk about that, we're going to listen to our two very capable presenters. We're going to start with Jeffrey. I'm going to ask you to share your screen, and he's going to take you into the next part. So enjoy, and we will see you back in a few minutes. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Tjalle. I'm going to present you something about shared mobility. And the first thing I want to say is, don't just like shared mobility. Don't like it at all, but plan it. That's my main message for today. And Autodealer.net is a network for shared mobility in Flanders, which has already supported more than 50 local governments in creating a shared mobility action plan. We do a lot more, but I have not many time, so I'm going to dive into it. First of all, shared mobility, that's a wide range of solutions. And that's very important because if you are talking about planning shared mobility, you have to be aware that there are a lot of options of shared mobility. If we're talking about car sharing, you have free-floating car sharing, you have round-trip car sharing, you have also the sharing of privately owned cars. I'm not gonna dive into details in this, but I can answer questions if you have. But just to say, a wide range of different kinds of shared options, car sharing options, and also a different impact that they generate. If we are talking about bikes, it's the same, it's similar, a lot of different forms. You have back to one bike sharing, you have free floating bike sharing, you have back to many bike sharing, and so on and so on. So a shared mobility action plan is actually the way to make sure that everything you want to do and achieve with shared mobility, that it will work. So first of all, in a nutshell, what is it, a shared mobility action plan? Well, it's very simple. It's creating ambitious long-term shared mobility goals. We are talking in 5 years. So what do we want to achieve with shared mobility for the next 5 years? And not only our goal is important, but also every year we're going to say we're going to do this, and this of concrete actions. And then, It's also very interesting to create a bus when you're a councillor or a local government and you say, we have launched a shared mobility action plan. Very interesting to call the press to you and make sure that they say something about it. As we're speaking about the goals, the long-term goals, it's about the amount of shared cars, bikes you want to achieve within 5 years. It's about the amount of users of car, bike sharing, step sharing, you name it. But it's also about the zero emission shared vehicles. How many of the shared cars you want to be zero emission? And also it's about awareness, because I'm going to talk to this later, but people have to know what it is, shared mobility, before they can use it. So those are some goals you can point in an shared mobility action plan. So the start is very simple. You need a vision. Well, that's not so simple, but for us it's simple. The vision is, what do we want to achieve? Impact. We want to maximize the active transport modes and minimize the transportation with cars, with with planes, and so on and so on. So that's very important. It's about those things I just listed up. And then after you have a vision, you're going to describe the current situation. How many shared vehicles you have today? How about your carbon dioxide burst today? How many is it? How many mobi hubs you have? So you create point zero in your shared mobility action plan. And then it's very simple. Then you use the circle of success. The circle of success, well, you need to have a good framework. That's your policy instrument, carrots and sticks. Then you need to have an offer, of course, because without shared vehicles, no shared mobility, very obvious. And often forgotten, but very important, what is the demand? You have to create the demand. You have to communicate, and that's very important. Let people know shared mobility is a viable option. So those three things you put into a shared mobility action plan after you said, those are my goals. First of all, a good framework. I just picked something out. A framework is about parking policies, for instance, because parking places and permits are very important. Those are the first communication things. People always passing by every day, passing by parking spots for shared cars, for instance. The first time they just walk by, the second time also, a third time they say, oh, what is this? And then every day they get a sensitizing about shared mobility. So very interesting. So as I said, best promotion of car sharing. And it's also very interesting to make sure that new project developments can lower parking norms, and then you can project developers make sure or obligate that they integrate shared mobility in their new project developments. So that's about the parking policies. Don't forget about the Mobi hubs. We are not talking about Mobi hubs today, but they are very important when you plan shared mobility. So that's another thing. And other things in the framework are make sure you have a shared mobility coordinator. That's not easy, but very obvious, because shared mobility touches different policy levels. It's about public space, it's about mobility, it's about inclusion, it's about a lot of things. So make sure you have a coordinator to coordinate everything. Inclusion is very important in a framework, and also the carrots and the sticks. As I said, for instance, a good stick is make sure that owning a private car is more expensive than sharing a car. Evaluation tools are important. And then very, very important, that's money, money, money. It's so funny. You really need money. If you are serious about shared mobility, you need to have a budget. So those things are about framework. Offer. So the offer is very, you need to have policy about offer. For big cities, it's not a problem. Providers will take care because there is a business model, and you can seduce the right ones with incentives. For instance, you give them free parking permits or free parking spaces, and you make sure that they come. But I would suggest if you are a rather big city and providers want to come to you, make a framework for tenders, because what do you want to achieve? That was one of my first slides. You want to achieve impact. So make sure that you have a framework for tenders where you can make sure that the shared mobility providers with the biggest impact on public space, on carbon dioxide, on modal shift, and so on, that they are coming to you. Not gonna go into detail of this because of the time. For municipalities, it's not that easy because there is no business model. So if you want to introduce an offer in a municipality, maybe you can start sharing your own fleet, because then people are first making recognition with car sharing. You can also stimulate people to share their own car or their own vehicle. People own very much cars, or very many cars, also bikes and special bikes and cargo bikes, and you name it. People can share that. So you can stimulate that. You can also use a minimal revenue guarantee for providers. What does that mean? That means that maybe it's for the business not so interesting to come over to your municipality. But if you say, well, Mr. Provider, for the first 2 years, I'm going to give you every month the money you need to have a break-even point. And in that way, they have 2 years of commitment that they can make sure that they have a good business model, so they can communicate and make sure that it's working. So that's a good idea. And of course, if we are talking about sharing your own fleet, maybe there are businesses or other organizations in your municipality that own vehicles, and maybe they don't use it in the weekends or after office hours, so you can share that too. And then my last point, the communication, so the demand side of the circle of success. Very important, and I'm just going to point out some key elements. First of all, you don't do it yourself as a local government or as a car sharing provider. You work together with your stakeholders. That's local government, providers, but also local organizations, local economy, volunteers, and you name it. Then set a common goal. For instance, in the city of Ghent, my hometown, we aimed at 25,000 people who used shared cars till 2025. So we have a common goal, and then we have one message. We want to be the car sharing city of Belgium. And then repeat this message, because car sharing is a mental process. You won't start sharing a car or sharing a bike when I convince you today. No, you have to think about it. You have to talk with your wife or your husband or with your family or with your friends, because it's very mental. You've been growing up with the idea, my car is my freedom, is my status symbol. So it takes time. Also, if I'm going to say to you, car sharing is great, bike sharing is great, that doesn't work. Your neighbor has to say it to you, or your friends, or your family, because those people you believe. And then the vibes, yeah, make sure that if you do a communication campaign for let's say the 5 years of the car sharing or the shared mobility action plan, you can't do it by one vibe. So what I mean is, for instance, every 3 months you target another target group, or you target another part of your city or another need or the companies or whatever. So your message is still lively and vibrant. And then, of course, you have behavior change science. We call it behavior change magic. Use that. And I see, I'm looking at the time. Tjalle, do I have 2 more minutes, or well, if I don't hear you, then I just do my last slide. But the
Go
behavior
ahead.
change magic is very interesting. It's about 5 things. First of all, you have the first spark. What does it mean? Make sure that people are aware there is something like shared mobility. Put it in their real life. The parking spaces, for instance, were very interesting to make sure everybody is aware of shared mobility. But people also can communicate through billboards or via shared cars, because shared cars are always, this is a shared car and so on. So that's a good message. The middle picture here is just a ground painting. So make sure that people are aware, hey, there is something like shared mobility. And then the second thing is inform them. If they are aware, then you have to say, well, shared vehicles are very interesting, because when you need a vehicle, you can use a vehicle. And how do you do that? Well, it's very simple. You make a reservation and so on. So you inform them how is the system working, but also what are the disadvantages of owning a car, for instance, because you need to look for a parking spot, you have to make sure that there is insurance paid, and so on and so on. So you inform them. The third thing is you have to convince them, persuade. And how do you do that? Well, that's very simple. You use ambassadors. Like I said before, you use neighbors, family, people who are already using shared vehicles, because they know how it works and they have the confidence of the people they are talking to. And also use the right moment. It means that in some life changing moments, people are more adaptable to changing their habits. For instance, when they move to another city, when they have another workplace, when they are married, and so on and so on. So that's also interesting. And also the incentives, very interesting to persuade. For instance, say you get 20 euros start budget, or we pay the inscription price. The fourth thing is the supporting. That's once people are convinced, I'm going to start sharing a car or sharing a bicycle, then they need to, they need to know how to do it. So that you can do that with personal advice, but also with tryout. Let them try, for instance, an electrical shared car and so on. You can also put up a system with local buddies, people who are using shared vehicles and who are saying, well, if people want to know more, they can contact me. I go with them to the shared car or the shared bike, and I explain how it works. So that is that. And then the last point is the consolidation and the connecting and repeating the message. Because once you start sharing a vehicle, it's always nice to hear, man, you are great. It's so good that you started to share a car. You are perfect, and so on and so on. So repeat the message. And that's basically the behavior change magic. And that was my story. Thank you very much.
Super. Thank you, Jeffrey, for your interesting presentation. I will now ask Michael to share his screen to start the presentation. And while he's doing that, I will guide you towards Menti once again. The link and the code is in chat. That is the point to ask questions. So this is what you will... I already saw there are 3 questions in, so there's room for more, so we can answer them later. But first off, we're going to listen to Michael Johansson talk about the role of shared mobility policies for green space and more. Have fun.
Thank you so much, Tjalle. Thank you, Jeffrey, especially for the nice ABBA song. I'm so proud of you. It sounded so nice. As Tjalle mentioned, I will talk a little bit about the role of shared mobility in policies, especially focusing on the benefits and potential that action plan, as Jeffrey mentioned, actually has for creating green urban values and also space for people and not vehicles. So my research basically focuses on resilient and adaptive cities. I have a lot of research going on about climate change, CO2 balances, but also what I will explain a little bit about today is about the importance of natural urban ecosystem services, and also the importance of nature-based solution within the urban environment. And what is also interesting is the perspective on mobility, because that is actually the tool or the key for creating resilient and adaptive cities. by working with these kind of shared mobility action plans, as Jeffrey mentioned, have smart mobility, working with sustainable logistics, you actually can achieve a lot of good improved local environment, especially for us, the inhabitants, but also for visitors, for businesses, and also for creating biodiversity within the context of urban cities. So this is actually the challenge. We have a lot of people still moving into urban regions. We must focus on densification processes. And it is now when it actually comes to a conflict situation within cities, where we actually have a lot of housing, new developing housing buildings, creating conflicts between green urban space, because we know that the more houses we build, still in some parts, we focus on producing a lot of hard infrastructure for the vehicles, for the apartments, for the houses, and so on, which means that it takes a lot of urban space and quality. And there we actually have the conflict. For example, we know in a global perspective that every fifth day, we are building a Paris somewhere around the world with all the resources needed, all of the infrastructure needed, and so on, so on. So it is a challenge, not only in a local perspective, even in a global perspective. So we'll try to focus and have the Swedish context. Sorry for that, but I think it could be applied to more or less every city that you are representing here today. This is just a figure about densification processes in Sweden, and we can see that more or less all of the cities is increasing more or less, and we see that the largest regions, the Malmö region in the southern part, also the Gothenburg area and the Stockholm area is rapidly increasing. So this is a challenge if we do not work with action plans to break off the importance of parkings, for example. So this actually means, in a Swedish perspective, that we actually have more or less a little bit more than 40 square meters per person housing area. And when we talk about parking, we actually have 50 square meters per person only in Sweden. So this is pretty interesting, just having some sort of background information that we're actually having more infrastructure for parking vehicles than we actually have for living. So this is actually more or less what Jeffrey's action plans could resolve. This means that we actually, if we work with shared mobility, we hopefully reduce the need for private car ownership. And this, of course, frees a lot of urban space if we build in this kind of infrastructure already from the beginning. And what is interesting is, what can we actually do with this free space? That is what I think is really interesting in this kind of research focus. This is once again an example from Helsingborg. This is not a parking lot. It was actually a high school. It was my old high school. You had just an asphalt surface. And then they put houses instead of the high school. And they created this nice green urban meeting place instead. So I think this is improvement that creates sustainable cities. And this is a lot of information. I will try to make it as short as possible. We can focus on the football field. The figures is exactly the same amount of space needed, but it is in different contexts. So speaking about football field, for example, once again, the Helsingborg case in Sweden. Helsingborg is a Swedish city with approximately 150,000 inhabitants. The demand for parking space due to the increase of car dependency the last 20 years, only in the small city of Helsingborg, has the increased demand for 34 football fields for parking space for the last 20 years. And this means that today at 2022 or 24, you have a demand in Helsingborg for approximately 152 football fields of just parking space. And the number in brackets is if you have a very efficient shared mobility action plan, you can actually reduce this demand very much. So this is the aim that we try to solve in the Tjalle North Squared project as an example. The importance of green urban space. Of course, we know that vegetation makes us happy. It makes us having opportunities to recreation and so on. But there are so much important that we actually do not really see, but is almost more important than just having the recreational, the cultural values. We talk about the provisioning services, which is actually that we can have the food production. We can have a local urban food production instead of parking spaces. We can have water and energy balances. We have the supporting services, which means that we have increased biodiversity opportunity, also nutrient cycling, soil formation, which is very, very important, of course. Then we had the regulating services that we actually, if we plant more vegetation, we have climate regulation, we have flood regulations and so on, which is also important for having a sustainable cities, especially when we have the urban heating island effect, which means that the more hard infrastructure we have, the warmer it becomes. So vegetation is very important in that perspective. Then, as I mentioned, the cultural perspective, the educational, recreational, the aim for a good living health is also important to understand and know. So, once again, back in Helsingborg, if we have the total number of cars in Helsingborg, and we see how much potential a city could have not producing parking space, which means that if you actually have vegetation instead of parking spaces, you could actually gain a carbon sink, which can have a lot of CO2 uptake, which is also important for municipalities' climate and energy plans, especially in cities that have a high temperature zones and so on. So this is also important to understand that not only the potential in urban meeting places, it's also by natural causes that creates opportunities to work with carbon sinks and so on. So what does our research really say? Well, of course, for obvious reasons. First, we shape the cities. Then, if we do not plan it wisely, the cities actually shapes our behavior. We know that every city got as much traffic as it allows. And that is also important to understand and especially address cities to work really hard with this kind of shared mobility action plans. We know that the importance and the actual values is what happens between buildings. And that is also important to address when we're actually working with streetscapes and so on. The city should be approached as a meeting place. I think that is pretty obvious. I think a city is created for us, inhabitants, visitors, and businesses, not only for vehicles. So, my final slide, how do you actually achieve livable cities? Well, we have to focus from one function systems to multifunctional space systems, which means that we will have multifunctional spaces instead of just one function, for example, just a street for cars. We must improve that kind of new innovation in urban planning. We must also go from standard solutions to tailored solutions, from selling a product to providing a service, just as Jeffrey mentioned. We can't see the car as a product. We must see the trip as a service instead. So focus from object stated value to shared value instead. And also that from strict urban structures to sustainable proximity instead. So if you want to read more, I think Tjalle can perhaps send out a link to, this is just some of the new reports that we made within the Tjalle North Squared project this January. If you want to read more about parking for sustainable cities, but also the importance of sustainable streetscapes, as I mentioned. Yes, I think that was that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael. Super interesting again, just as Jeffrey's presentation. We are nice and well on schedule, so we will dive into the questions. Now I will share the screen. I've seen some questions coming in already, so thank you for that. We will just go over them one by one and see what it is. You can still post the questions when they come along. We will see who can answer them. I will go up one. And while we're waiting for the first question, I also want you to send you towards the Share North Squared podcast called The Low Carb Diet, where among others, Michael is talking about the situation in the city of Helsingborg. You also mentioned very quickly in your presentation. So go to Spotify or your own favorite podcast platform and look for the Low Carb Diet. Subscribe to that and have a listen, have a more detailed focus on the Helsingborg case. But first, we'll dive into the questions. First question here, and either Jeffrey or Michael, you can choose who wants to answer. I think the first one is mainly focused on, yeah, it can be for both. So it's, where do you think the idea of the 15-minute cities fit into this, what you were talking about? Any thoughts on that from our two presenters?
I believe that it is has a very large potential, of course. I think the challenge is when we actually focus or having the issue about, or even the possibility for obvious reasons, but when we talk about larger working regions, which means that if you work in one city, you have to commute for 1 hour, 1 hour and a half in some places in Sweden. So that creates challenges, because even though if you have a very compact, dense urban situation, but if you don't work close to your home, that is the challenge, because the further away, in some cases, the less better public transportation and so on, which means that you are more or less car dependent. And that is one of the challenges, I would say. But if you have the opportunity to work and live in the same city, this is a very interesting concept.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
I would like to add that shared mobility is just perfect for the 15-minute city, because you're just doing your transportation by walking or public transport, and when you need a special vehicle, for instance a car, you just can use it when you need it, and you don't need to own a car. So if you have a good 15-minute city, shared mobility is essential.
Okay, thank you. And excuse me for not having the slides on full screen. Let's go to the actual first question there was. I think this will be for Jeffrey. Are there examples of people in cities working as coordinators and communicative repeaters? Is it a full-time job, and what profiles do people in these positions have? Interesting and a very concrete question.
Yes, they are examples, but I have to admit they are rare. Because shared mobility is not always seen as a very important thing, and more like something that's being a side. But in our opinion, shared mobility is just an essential link in sustainable mobility. But if you're looking to the city of Ghent, for instance, yeah, they have a coordinator, but also municipality of Schoten, a little village of like 20,000 inhabitants, they have that. But I think it's more interesting to see what profile you need. And I think at first sight, you need to have a very engaged person, and a person who is a kind of bridge builder. He needs to connect people with each other. He needs to, or she needs to connect different services to each other, and also somebody who sees opportunities. I think this is the profile you're looking for.
Super. Thank you for your answer, Jeffrey. Yes. How do you make sure to address culturally diverse groups efficiently and effectively? That's a challenge. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I think the most important thing to say here is, again, use the peer group. Use local ambassadors, for instance, and I saw another question who is linked with this. Um, we once we had an information session in a mosque or part of a mosque together with an imam and the councillor of the city. And that was very interesting because the imam just made sure that there were a lot of people attending to our information session, and the counselor was talking about the policy, and then we, as a not-for-profit organization, were telling about shared mobility. And after that session, 10%, so that's quite a lot, I think, 10% or 7 persons from the 70 started sharing a car. So use the peer group. That would be my main message.
Super. Thanks for your answer. I'm trying to move this along. Yes. Are there any success stories of municipalities that tried car sharing initiatives? There must be. Then, Jeffrey, you're in the right place to tell these success stories.
Yes, they are.
And do you want to elaborate on that?
Well, yeah, I think if you really, maybe it's interesting to connect you with some municipalities that are having successful implemented car sharing initiatives. But I'm spontaneous thinking about a city at the sea here in Flanders, Kokzijde, very little city. They started with 7 shared cars with the so-called minimal revenue guarantee, like I told you. And also there was not only the minimal revenue guarantee, but if the city or the municipality succeeded in making sure that a lot of users are using the shared cars, they have to pay less or maybe nothing when the break-even point could reach with just a normal thing. And today, from the 7 cars, already 6 cars are just the city is not paying for them anymore because a lot of people are using that, and that is only in 1.5 years that is reached that goal. And that is because the city was very active in communicating and in promoting the car sharing service.
Again, communication is key. Thank you for your answer. And this is a very successful case. Let's see what we have next. So we've answered this one. This is also a very specific question. How long do you think it takes so that people using car sharing get rid of their own car? I'm paraphrasing a bit.
Yeah, that's a very difficult question, and I don't think you can give one answer to that. For some, it's just immediately. For others, it's like 5 years. I think one thing we can be sure at is that people who are starting sharing a car are using a car less often, and they are using public transport and active transport modes more often. So in the end, after a while, they're gonna see my car is not being used anymore, my personal car. So why do I need it? So in the end, normally everybody gets rid of their own car.
Super.
I think just to add something that I
yes,
think that
go ahead.
Just thinking about it, not only car sharing, I think it's one of the many possibilities, as we mentioned, public transportation, also cycling and so on. So I think the puzzle itself that creates opportunity, not only car sharing itself, but it's one important stakeholder in this perspective.
Super. Talking about stakeholders, maybe you can try this next question. What is the best way to work together with all the stakeholders? Is it co-creation? Is it civilian initiatives? Is it what would the best way to work together with these stakeholders be, from your perspective?
Well, I think there are different ways. Maybe I just can give an example of a very successful way of working together with stakeholders. And it's about co-creation, bottom-up initiatives. I think bottom-up is always the best because you need users of shared vehicles. So if you just are doing the things top-down and nobody is interested in using the shared vehicles, then yeah, you're getting nowhere. But there is a concept that is being initiated by Mpact and Autodeel.net here in Flanders. It's called Sharing Neighborhood. And it's actually a test period of 2-3 months that people really can test shared vehicles, and they engage themselves to not use their own car. So the people are involved of a specific neighborhood, but also the municipality is involved because they are making sure that there are shared vehicles in the neighborhood to test. But also local organizations are involved because sometimes they give how do you say that? Incentives to use shared vehicles. And of course, the providers are involved because they help people to understand how the system is working. And that is very successful. You need to have a budget for that. Because yeah, you want to pay the providers, you have to make sure that public space is reformed into other things. But in a lot of cases, about half of the participants is starting to share a car. And also important, 90% of all participants is saying that when the current privately owned car is broke down, they have the intention to start sharing cars and other vehicles. So that's a very good idea, and yeah, involving everybody, every stakeholder, and also let people test how it is to live without an own car and make use of other transport modes.
Perfect answer. Thank you. Let's see what we have next. It's also a very open question, but an interesting one. How important is the media in portraying and communicating about sharing services? What is the role of the media in this? Any takes on this? Also from Michael, if you have an idea. Try to find out. Maybe we will go to the next one. Maybe we think of an answer. I think we have one more left. Yes. This is linked to your previous answer, Jeffrey. Are you also addressing, for example, cultural ambassadors like imams in religious groups in order to get this idea to new milieux groups? I don't know. How do you promote active modes of transport additionally?
Well, yeah, I think I answered already this question. And if you're talking about active modes, well, if you're promoting shared mobility, then you're also promoting active modes, because every study, every research is pointing out that people who are using shared vehicles are tend to walk more, bike more, and so on and so on. So those are two things together. But the role of the media, maybe I can say one thing very short. I think the media is playing a crucial role, of course, because if they send positive messages about shared mobility, then you are working on the first spark. You know, the magic of behavior change. The first spark is very important. People need to know that there is something like shared mobility. People need also to know that owning a private car is not that interesting in many cases. But here is media also playing a very crucial role, because if you're looking at the promotion campaigns of privately owned cars, you always see cars traveling in cities without other cars. It's just like heaven when you drive in the new Mercedes or the new whatever. So I think media has a very big and important role, and they are not taking it serious.
Yes, that is very clear. And I think this is people first have to know what's going on before they move forward. So thank you for all these questions. They were super interesting. Thank you for your answers. It's not always easy to answer all these things on the spot. While I'm looking for something, I close the window with some information I wanted to share with you. I want first of all to thank Jeffrey and Michael for their super interesting presentations. I would like to thank you all for participating and for your questions and for your time. I'm looking for the date of the next webinar. So, and I close the window. That's always bad. But I found the link. Also, when it comes to communication, look for the Low Carb Diet, the podcast series we just started from within the Share North Squared project. And find it on Spotify and any of your podcast things. Also, we will send an email afterwards with all the information, with the presentations, with links to the project itself. You can subscribe to the newsletter if you haven't done so already, and I really warmly invite you to do so. The next webinar, and put this on your agenda already, will be on Tuesday, the 19th of September at 2 p.m., so at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. This will be with Esther de Reis from Autodelen.net. So again, it will be Autodelen. They have a lot of interesting knowledge to share with you all. And Cornelia Cordes, who is the project manager of the Share North Squared project. And this will be more about shifting the focus from parking requirements to mobility needs within real estate development, and also the roles of cities and creating policy to sustain this. This will be the 19th of September. Invitations will follow. If you subscribe to our newsletter, you will get all the info you need in time. For now, I just want to say goodbye. Have a good afternoon. I hope you enjoyed this. If you have any more questions, you can always post them, ask them to us. We will get them to the right people. And thanks for your presentations, for your time, for your attention, and go Share North Squared. Have a nice day.